Over the last couple of videos we looked at EQ, we looked at parallel compression, we looked at sidechain compression, and we created a really powerful dubstep beat. Over the next couple of videos we're going to use those techniques and others to create this kind of UK funky tropical house kind of beat. So that's what we're going to make, and here's how we're going to make it. So starting with a blank project, we're going to right click and create a mixer just like we did in video 1, double click, call it drums. We're going to hold shift, again right click, create a Kong drum designer, hit tab, and just like in video 1 we're going to connect outputs 3 and 4 to channel 1, outputs 5 and 6 to channel 2, outputs 7 and 8 to channel 3, outputs 9 and 10 to channel 4, outputs 11 and 12 to channel 5, outputs 13 and 14 to channel 6, and outputs 15 and 16 to channel 7, because we're going to use all of Kong's outputs this time. Hit tab to go back round the front, click this to show drum and effects, NN Nano Sampler, and we're going to find our kick drum. The kick drum that I'm going to use today comes from a sample library called Xfer. It's really good for house music. And I'm going to close that down a moment. Just as before, right click, holding shift, create an M-class equalizer. And let's call that kick, and let's call that kick as well. Cool. And as before, take these leads going to channel 1, put them in the output of the equalizer, and connect outputs 3 and 4 to your EQ. Oh, and don't forget to change this to outputs 3 and 4, otherwise you won't hear anything. Cool, exactly the same as before. Parametric 1 on, gain up to full, and we're going to sweep down the frequency spectrum. That sounds about right to me, about 140 Hertz. I'm going to widen this Q curve a bit, turn the gain down a little bit. Just as we did in video 1, I'm going to turn on the low shelf, turn it down to about 70 Hertz, gain all the way down, and again turn on parametric 2, gain up to full. We're going to find that clickiness again. So about 9K I reckon. Going to turn the gain down a bit, widen the Q curve a little bit, and that's our nice thumpy kick drum. With EQ, without EQ. Much better. Cool. Next thing's next, we're going to find our snare drum. NN Nano Sampler again. The snare drum I'm going to be using today comes from a refill called Salazar Brothers Reggaeton Refill. You can get it off the Propellerheads website, and it's good for kind of tropical music. There we are, nice chunky reggaeton snare. Cool, so again, I'm just going to close that down, right click and create an M-class equalizer. Let's double click and call it snare. Let's call this snare as well. And take those leads going from 5 and 6, put them into the equalizer output, and connect that to the input. And you know the drill by now, gain up to full on parametric 1, and let's have a little sweep. Oh, and again, don't forget to change the output. output 5 and 6. Cool. I'm going to turn the gain down a little, widen the Q curve quite a bit, and just as I did in video 1, I'm going to turn on the high shelf and boost that a little bit. But now I want to layer this snare with a tom. So we're going to go over to pad 3 and we're going to put an NN Nano sampler and we're going to find a nice big tom. This is coming from a sample library called Tropical Shake Up. It's a prime loops one. Cool. And that's going to come out of outputs 7 and 8. And we're going to do exactly the same thing with our tom as we did with our kick and snare. Create an M-class equalizer, holding shift, tab round the back, connect it up, and rename it tom. And turn on parametric 1, gain up to full. Now it's nice and boomy around there. I'm going to turn the gain down a bit, widen the Q curve a bit, turn on the low shelf just as I did with the kick drum, turn that down to about 70 Hertz, gain right down, boost this a little bit more, and just as I did with the snare drum, I'm going to boost the high shelf. In fact, I'm going to turn down the frequency so it's boosting from even lower. Cool, but I want this tom to play at the same time as the snare. I want these to be layered. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click my snare drum, and over here where it says pad group, this little row that says link, I'm going to click D, and then I'm going to click a tom drum, and I'm going to click D again. So now, when I play my snare or my tom, they'll both play together. Cool. And I'm going to program a little rhythm. I'm going to hit F7 to go over to our sequencer. I'm going to draw a little box here. That's a little bit fast. I'm going to double click here where tempo is and change that to 130 BPM. And I'm going to call this kick because we're going to add another note lane and call this snare tom. Cool. Now there's two reasons that I've chosen to do these in different note lanes. One is that when you come to write your track, it makes life a little bit easier because you can say, I'm just going to have kick drum for the first 8 bars and then I'm going to bring in my snare and tom. But the other main reason is because I want this snare and tom line to have a bit of a shuffle to it. And we can achieve that using Reason's Regroove Mixer. This is really handy because it allows you to add different shuffle and slide controls to different note lanes. So if I click here where it says select groove and I assign this to A1, now you'll hear that when I turn up the shuffle, it syncopates the snare and tom rhythm. So it's a really useful tool for drum programming, and I can mess with the slide as well if I want to put them slightly out of phase. Cool, so I'm going to leave that at about 54%. It's subtle, but I think it gives it a bit more of a bounce to it. And next we're going to add a clap. So, you know the drill, show drum and effects, NN Nano Sampler, and I'm going to grab a clap from the Reason Factory sound bank. And we're going to put this out of outputs 9 and 10. Now, we haven't yet talked about effects in Kong, because Kong actually has a whole load of really good built-in effects, including a parametric equalizer, which is not as sophisticated as the M-class parametric equalizer, but if you just want to give it a bit of a boost to one frequency, for example, you want to make your clap slightly brighter, as I'm going to do, then it's really good. So I'm going to boost the gain here, give it a fairly wide Q curve, and we've got a much brighter clap now. Cool. Now I'm going to create a new note lane again, call it clap, and I'm going to put a clap on every downbeat. But it doesn't sound quite right to me. It's not quite grooving how I want it to. Because what I want is a little bit of that clap snap before the kick drum. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to assign this to A2. And we're going to open up our regroove mixer again, and we're just going to pull the slide down just a little bit. You hear the difference? I'm going to copy and paste that a couple of times. So yeah, when you're working with this kind of more percussive, more kind of tropical style of drums, the regroove mixer is a really vital tool to make sure all your tracks are grooving right. Cool. In the next video, we're going to add a loop, we're going to add a snare roll, we're going to add a tom fill, and we're going to add some side-chained white noise, so don't go away.